There you go.
So, Erin, thanks so much for joining us. And it was always fun. When I finally found you, I did a big search to find you on YouTube and landed right in Pittsburgh. And so, and I thought, well, what a cool way to show someone using their gifts and talents and interests while they're interviewing people, which is what she wants to do, is be a broadcaster. And so let's see. Let me get to my notes here. So the lady, who's the lady that showed you how to do the broadcast, and what was the name of your program?
It's called Look Who's Here. And my producer, Jennifer Jordan, she's also a really good friend of mine, and she inspired me so much to be a broadcaster.
So, you know, I'll read the slide when we get back up, but I called Jennifer and she said because your interest in being media and that kind of thing, uh, it has helped her create her own career. So
Yes.
it's kind of cool how, we influence each other.
We feel like combined our
Yeah,
work effort.
that's right. So let's see. So you're with Achieva. You're working for
Yep.
them. And what department are you working with?
I work in communications and development.
Their development is your promotion. You just got a promotion, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. So was your first interview with your parents?
Yes.
Yes. And it's a difficult time for you right now. But what you have created a video of you interviewing, and what a wonderful memory of your father.
Yes.
And who was your biggest influencer?
Like I said, besides Jennifer inspired me to be a broadcaster, but my biggest fan ever in my entire life is my dad.
It's your dad, yes. And you know what? He'd be so proud of you right now, Erin. Look at his little girl and her first webinar. How cool is that?
Really, really cool.
So you're 50 years old, right?
Yes.
And you are the youngest of 6 kids.
Yes.
Were you spoiled?
Yeah.
So when you said you were talking obviously to Jennifer Jordan, and you said, she probably asked you, what do you want to do with your life? And you said, I want to do broadcasting, right?
Actually, that's not how I got started. I was on my way into work,
Okay.
and I kind of looked over. Somebody was not behind me, but kind of glanced a little bit more. I didn't realize my caretaker was there, Jennifer Jordan, and also she went to talk to Lisa Raza, who I work at Akiva, to see if I can work in communications. Then after that, became to work in development with Jody.
So you had the show, and again, what was it called?
Look who's here.
Yeah, and how come you picked that title?
Because every time a staff walks in, it's like a revolving door. And each one of the staff will walk in, I go, look who's here. Look who's here. And that became a title of Look Who's Here. And I'm the founding host.
That's really amazing. And if you go on YouTube, you could probably look who's here, or put Erin Gannon's name in there, and you will find her. So, what were some of the skills to prepare? Since you wanted media, and the video that I saw, which everyone else just saw right now, is you were interviewing people. So, did you have?
Yes.
How did you practice How did you get ready?
How did I get ready? I picked my own questions. Not pick. Not how I picked. I go on StoryCorps and I use that questions. There are different questions you can use based on which one you want to use. So I kind of used some of those questions
Mm-hmm.
on Marsha Blanco, one of my interviews. My second one was with my mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister Megan and my sister Beth always keep me not grounded, but keep me the way, keep me, make me look like I'm special, like I can do this.
Yeah.
It's been my goal and dream to do.
And I hear that your dad was a big golfer, so they have you like do the communications for the golfing fundraisers, right?
Yes.
903 4
And
5 8
oops,
1 is not available.
I just said
Okay.
it. So, so you practice these questions, and um, how many takes did you have to do it in?
How many takes? I'm not sure because I also I am a golfer, international golfer as is, and when I was young, my dad took me out to hit a golf ball. See if I can hit a golf ball, which I did, and I hit by 100 yards straight down the middle.
And the rest was history, right?
Yes,
So, what did you feel like when you first saw your video on YouTube?
that was awesome. Not awesome, amazing.
Yeah. So, so if you had any piece of advice to give somebody who's interested in getting into media and broadcasting, or even any kind of job, what would you encourage them with?
I pick your own question. No, wait, not pick. Choose your own questions and what your questions would be, or who inspired who you want to be, or what kind of topic you want to use. And I
Hmm.
use StoryCorps and all kinds of different questions you can use, different enemy questions you can use.
So really, it was perfect to interview you and show your video because we want our families and people to dream bigger and to find out what their passion is, and that might be a more successful job fit than with someone else who doesn't know you. So that's the whole point of us having um, Mike on this program tonight, and your video. I'm sure people will be wanting to keep watching and passing it on. But I know that you did said your advice to give was be who you are and achieve your own dreams
And your own goals.
and your own goals. So right now, you're part of the self-advocacy group at Achiever,
Yes,
correct?
I am.
And you also, let's see. So what do you do with that group?
There was a coworker that I worked with. Her name was Julie Tutmage, and she started the Empowered Voices. And there's another broadcast coming out. It's called Amplifying Voices,
Amplified voices?
to extend your voice out for the media. So it'll be, I would say, easier, but it'll make you more involved
Hmm. Okay,
and
so what's
love
your,
what you're doing.
absolutely. So what's your next, in your mind, your next dream, what's the next project you want to do?
My next one I want to do is interview my sisters.
Do you have one sister or all your sisters?
I only have, I'm the youngest. Beth is the oldest. Then Kevin. Then Mark. then Kevin and Sean.
So you have one sister, just two girls in your family.
There's three of us.
Okay. So what do you want to ask your sister? What do you want to interview her for?
There's several different things I want to ask, but I wanted to tell them they, besides Megan and Beth, they both inspired me to accomplish my goals, and they always want me to achieve my dreams, and I've done some of them already.
Yeah. So this is really exciting to hear you're going to have a new project. You'll have to make sure you let me know what the next one is. We've got a few minutes, like 4 minutes, if anybody wants to ask her a question. Unmute yourself. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to close with,
I
Erin?
want to close with enjoy your job, be positive, and love what you do, what at work, and also be yourself.
Well, I think that's great encouragement. We all need encouragement. So, Erin, I want to thank you for sharing your time. I'm hoping you're going to stay on to listen to what Mike is going to share.
Sure.
So let's go ahead, and I hope I don't mess this up, folks. I appreciate your. I just need to do this, okay? All right, so in this grant, we started uh, a an outreach for adults with IDD and their families, and we called it Leadership Academy. And it's the first time that I heard of Mike. He is the Mark Golden Associates President Emeritus. I'm grateful that he's able to come out of retirement for this little bit of a program. Began his passion, from what I was reading, as a water instructor at ARC camp. Yeah, attended the University of Southern Mississippi, special education, opened the very first group home in Mississippi during time of deinstitutionalization. Mike joined the Mark Gold Associates team to later be named their president. And here's the key right here. Mike has played a fundamental role in the development of customized employment and helped to establish terminology that is widely used in the disability employment to this day, including the term discovery.
I know this keeps sliding.
So, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and close this out and let you share the screen here.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Deb. And give me just a minute, folks, and I'll have my presentation ready for a full screen. That looks like it. Oops. So let me move this. Well, it's not moving. Okay. Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Michael Callahan, or Mike. I go by both. And it very nice because the first time I left my home state of Mississippi many years ago was to move to Cincinnati. So I was down in Hamilton County and spent a lot of time in Franklin County. In fact, all over the southeast part of your state. I traveled from Chillicothe to Athens and back to Columbus, and just did a weekly route as we were taking Mark Gold's technology, we call the try another way approach, and training staff across the state of Ohio. So I lived in Cincinnati for a year. My wife and I had moved up there, and we got terribly homesick. We enjoyed our time in Cincinnati, but we both had a south of Interstate 10 quality of life criteria, and we were quite a bit further north than south of Interstate 10. So we moved back to Mississippi and continued our work from there. So it's very nice to be with folks from Ohio again. And Deb, thanks for having me. And Erin, I really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you very much. And I'll make maybe some connections as we move forward through the information. And I'm going to bring you a bit of a historical perspective, but also to let you know what customized employment is, how it fits with discovery, because the two things really need to go together. And I'm so glad to hear that those initiatives are available both in Ohio and then in your neighboring state of Pennsylvania. Things are looking up for sure in terms of the fact that these concepts are being explored the way that they are and available to people. And Erin made the point a number of times of how important it was to have the work you do reflect who you are and how you feel most strongly about life. And discovery helps us to do that, and customized employment makes it available as an employment possibility. So that's where we're going with this, and we'll move forward. So whoever that is with the phone, if you could just mute your computer, it would help for any background noise. Thank you very much. So customized employment it's an innovation, and it maybe has been around a little too long to call an innovation, but it's one of those things. It's like one of the I'm crazy about singer-songwriters who all of a sudden feel like they've burst onto the scene, but when you get to know their lives, you find out they've been toiling for years, maybe decades in the background, and then all of a sudden kind of burst into popularity. And that's kind of how I feel about customized employment. I'm going to give you some information in this presentation that'll take you all the way back to 1988 of all things. And that was the first time I had an awareness that this thing that at the time it wasn't called customized employment, but that came to be, and then some stuff about the evolution as we went through the years from there, and maybe do kind of the same thing with discovery. And I had the honor and the opportunity to be involved as both were being understood and implemented early. And what customized employment basically does is to move away from having people have to compete for the demands of an open job and meet specific needs in a workplace based on contribution rather than competition. And this isn't giving someone a job, but if all we do is compare either how fast or how effectively somebody does a complete job as compared to how people make discrete contributions, then a lot of folks, I mean, at my age, I would certainly be out of that possibility. And except for aging, I don't have any particular disability, but just my ability to compete would be significantly affected. So a whole lot of people in this world, including a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, really struggle with that competitive threshold. And yet they can go to work, they can earn money, they can do employment in an area of that really fits who they are, if we focus on their contribution rather than solely on how they compete compared to others. And that, I mean, that, and employers, for the most part, stand ready to do that. I think where those of us in our field sometimes have a bigger problem with accepting this approach than many employers do. I've rarely found an employer who, when you meet some of their needs, would say, oh, but they just have to have it all. Well, employers realize very, very few employees come in with this whole package of all this, multitasking, and they can do anything in my workplace. It's nice if you find someone like that, but it's far more likely that they would accept a contribution. And one of the terms of art that our field has had since 1986 is a term written in US law called competitive supported employment. And as competitive employment, supported employment rolled out in the mid-60s, we tended to go and look for jobs that were open. And because supported employment focuses on and has an intention to support people with more significant impact of their disability, often people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that really affect their opportunity to be easily competitive. A lot of agencies would focus just on the entry level of the job market. So that put people in jobs that they really didn't want to do for the most part. And by the way, that are very challenging, very hard to do at that. I mean, the entry level, to use a basketball analogy, is like playing in the paint. I mean, there's a lot of elbowing, there's a lot of pushing, there's a lot of people moving in and out. It is a tough place to be. And so many, about 70%, traditionally 70% of all supported employment jobs were at the entry level of the service industry. And that is just a tough place. Though, I mean, I'm not complaining about that in the terms of that is real employment and people are getting paid. But when you listen to Erin and her dreams and what she wanted to do, I mean, Erin, I won't speak to you before you, but the fact is, you probably didn't want a janitorial job at the entry level of the job market. You wanted the job that you had in broadcasting, and that we had to do something differently. So you got this almost a whole underclass of individuals who, if they couldn't be competitive at that entry level of the service industry, then they actually were considered unemployable. And Voc Rehab considered them unemployable, and many of our service agencies considered them unemployable. And that drifted down to families began to say, well, my son, my family member, my daughter needs something that's not work because he, she, they can't work. And then that even drifts down into attitudes that people have about themselves. If they hear that enough, you begin to be convinced that you just can't work. And we needed a way out of that. We needed something that would begin to focus on what people wanted to do as a starting point. And it leads me to a story. This story about Kim is a story I love to tell because her experience helped me understand what customized employment is before it ever was named. And one of the things we had, excuse me, somebody's got their microphone on, so if you could please mute, that would really help. You might have just come on the call, so if you could mute your microphone, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So in order to try to help people work in jobs that they wanted, we began to develop some person-centered planning approaches that at the time just was called person-centered planning. And John O'Brien and Connie Lyle O'Brien and Beth Mount, all from Georgia, by the way, names that are still just giants in our field. They started person-centered planning in the early 80s, but it really wasn't focused on employment. Most of that was helping people get a meaningful life in the community outside of work. And by the mid 80s, when supported employment exploded on the scene, we knew we needed something that was like person-centered planning, but that was focused on employment, and it would start with who are you and what would you really like to do. And some people are really clear. Erin was really clear, it seems, about she knew she wanted to be in broadcasting. Some people aren't quite that clear about things. So the process actually needs to help them come to terms with what would work in their lives, what would work for them. And what I'm talking about here is the beginnings of what we now call discovery. And I had an opportunity in doctoral work at Syracuse University to work with some people that really tried to take this on. How can we help people prior to employment think about who they are and what would best work for them, and really what their strongest interests are. So these are really important human issues. And we started doing that, but we were doing it at a time when the vehicle we had was competitive supported employment, getting people jobs, and that were competitive. And this brings us to Kim. I had the opportunity to be involved in a project with United Cerebral Palsy's national office starting in 1987. And we were working in 3 states. We were working in New Jersey, Alabama, and Illinois. And in doing that work, we were working with people who had physical and intellectual disabilities. And I was able to meet Kim in Birmingham, Alabama, largest city in Alabama. And she was just coming out of a school program for students with significant physical and intellectual disabilities. And Kim's cerebral palsy affected her mobility, it affected her manipulation, and it affected her communication. And then on top of that, she had an intellectual disability. And yet she was able to say to us very clearly that she wanted to work with computers. And that just seemed as improbable as Erin saying, I want to be a broadcaster. I mean, it just didn't seem very likely. But of course, we didn't try to talk her out of it. We tried to figure out how could we find a competitive job that Kim could do that she could be hired for. And that's real tough. But we did it. We moved forward. and a great job developer. Did some of this pre-discovery, didn't even have the name. We didn't coin the name discovery until 96. So the term of art didn't exist, but the strategies did. So we got to know Kim. We found out who she was. We talked to her family. We talked to her siblings, people who knew her, the best teachers, the ones that had a good attitude. We talked to them, and then went out into the community and developed a job for her at a distribution center, somewhat optimistically calling itself Parisians Women's Wear. It's on the southeast side of Birmingham, in a place called Vestavia Hills, and Kim's job was to enter data for products that come through this distribution center into her computer. This was her very first day of work, so her workstation wasn't set up at all. And but she loved her job. She has use of one hand, and that hand has the impact of cerebral palsy, but she's able to use that left hand. Her right hand she doesn't use effectively at all. And she started doing data entry. But folks, the real world says this is a competitive job. The company, Parisians, had a productivity standard that she was expected to meet. And we had no idea how she was going to do that or if she was going to do it. But we just hoped something would happen in the meantime. And so we went through, and she was given a 6-month probation period to reach productivity. And Kim worked her heart out. She loved her job. She was paid regular wages, entry level wages for that company. She got a 35 or 40% discount at the local Parisians Women's Wear in town. It was a downtown store that moved out to the malls before it was bought up by another entity. And I mean, she's just loving it. But there are dark clouds on the horizon. Her highest productivity was about 32%. And no matter what we thought, I mean, anything we could do, it wasn't working. We weren't able to get that productivity up. And we were thinking, we're just going to have to go find her another job. We missed with this one, but we so didn't want her to be disappointed. We did one of the most shameful things I guess I've been a part of, is we went and found her a job without telling her we were finding her a job. Now, this was before the end was to come, we thought. So it was okay, let's do it. And we went to a JCPenney store and found her, negotiated a position in absentia. She wasn't even there with us, for a changing room attendant, which anymore is about security anyway. So how, Kim uses a wheelchair for mobility assistance and is not highly trained security personnel, but we hope for the best there also. And we just shouldn't have done it. And as the end got closer, we were approaching 6 months. We knew the company was under the gun. As soon as, in state of Alabama, as soon as you pass your probation, you have to show cause. It's way more of a union state than any state in the Deep South. And you have to actually show cause for why an employer is releasing a person. And there can be some questions, and employers don't like to do it. So they were going to let her go during probation. Except it didn't happen that way. Except that on what might have been her last day, a lawyer showed up at her workstation and said, "Miss Mitchell, we need you to come with us." And her supervisor, Kim's supervisor, was there with her and said, "Kim, it'll be okay. Come on, let's go." And so they go, and the job coach is there, and Kim is there in her wheelchair, and her supervisor and the lawyer, and they go into the human service director of human resources. And in there was also a personnel manager. So I mean, there were all sorts of suits and highfalutin people, and Kim must have just been scared to death. But she didn't know what was going on. But Brenda, her job coach, figured that they're going to tell her that she is fired, and it's going to be a terrible day. And so I need to be there with her. And so Brenda wants to go in, and she stopped at the door by the lawyer. And the lawyer said, Miss Carson, we won't need you. Everything's going to be fine. But we have a chair for you just outside. Please sit down. And Brenda's thinking, she wants to call somebody, so rights organization, just please. But the fact is, we don't, Kim has a lot of rights here, but job coaches don't necessarily have rights in that kind of scenario. So she just had to sit down and cool her heels. Well, this meeting took really a long time. And Brenda would tell on herself. Brenda's the job coach. And she said, I did a terrible thing. And Brenda, what did she told? I was Brenda's supervisor. And I said, Brenda, what did you do? She said, I tried to listen through the closed door. If you put your ear right up against a heavy wooden door, you can sometimes hear. She didn't have a glass, or I think she would have held it up to try to hear what was going on. And about that time, she channeled Lucille Ball, she said, and she could just imagine the door opening and falling into the room. So she quickly sat back down and just was, she said, I was sweating, I was worried, and I didn't get caught. And all of a sudden, Kim comes out, and she's smiling, and she's not crying, and she's wondering, how is this, and it's like, immediately Brenda knows she's got this job we developed for her. So she said, Kim, I'm so sorry about your job. Kim said, I'll miss the people down in computer pricing too. Yeah, I will. And Brenda's about to say, but we've got you another job. And Kim says, but I've got another job. And it's like, whoa, that's my line. What's this other job that you have? And Kim went on to tell Brenda what the meeting was about. And it was very interesting, because in that meeting, it turns out her supervisor had seen what was happening and knew that Kim could not continue to work in that competitive job because she could not meet the competitive standard. But she also knew that Kim had contributions that the company needed, that Parisians needed. So she went around to other same level peer supervisors and said, I've got this woman in computer pricing. She's not going to make productivity, but if you have unmet needs in your area, then I could take a look at them, and I have a pretty good idea to tell you whether she could meet some of your unmet needs. So what's an unmet need? An unmet need is a job task in a workplace that needs to get done, but isn't getting done because somebody's not fulfilling their job description. And she was able to develop a complete list of these unmet needs that then were offered to Kim. Kim turned to her supervisor, and supervisor said, I think you can do this, Kim. I think you can. In fact, I know you can. The fact is, do you want to do it? So Kim worked for 15 years at Parisians in the corporate reception area, the first person, and she would relieve the receptionist when the reception was gone. And then she worked in finance because she had some computer skills, but not high productivity. And then the thing that made her job just like, You mean they pay me for this? She got to work with the buyers that went to Milan and went to New York City and went to Paris and bought all the clothing that then comes into the store. And so Kim is now supporting them on tasks that need to be done that aren't getting done. And she worked for Parisians for 15 years. They were bought up by a large department store called Belk's, Belks, headquarters in Atlanta. And Belk's offered Kim a job in Atlanta, but by that time, Kim was actually the financial support for her mother, who was aging, and Kim said, I can't go. So she turned the job down, and the local UCP organization got her another job in Birmingham, where she is still there. When I heard the story, it was as if all kind of light bulbs went off in my head. I had never thought that you could go into a workplace and actually just look at discrete things that need to be done, not a job description, but actually looking at ways a person could benefit a business operation. So I started calling around and asking our legal people at UCP, is this legal? Can you do that? Very quickly, they called U.S. Department of Labor. Yes, you can do this. Can employers offer someone a job like this? We didn't have a name for it yet, but and have it really be a bona fide job. Everything turned out to be true. And the phrase used by Kim's supervisor, unmet needs, is now in the federal law that describes customized employment in the Rehab Act of 2014. It took that long, from 1988 to 2014, but the phrase that she used called unmet needs is actually it's the law of the United States. That's an amazing thing. So that's going to be the thing that's going to kick supported employment, customized employment into action. But we didn't have a name for it. We started calling it negotiated supported employment. And it operated under that name from 1988 to 2001, when one of our colleagues left United Cerebral Palsy and went to the U.S. Department of Labor and coined the term customized employment to represent this. But still, even in 2001, they coined the term, but we didn't have any law to back it up. This is the 2014 amendments to the Rehab Act, and except for the note I have in parentheses, every word in here is the law of the land. This is U.S. law. So customized employment means, I hated that they put competitive in there, but it was politically, that was, it's been really hard to get bipartisan support, and we got it on this, but we had to live with the term competitive in the definition. Competitive integrated employment for an individual with a significant disability that's based on an individualized determination of the strengths, needs, and interests of the individual with a disability. And I've put a note in there. This can be done with discovery. That's how you find the strengths, needs, and interest of the individual. You do the discovery process. And it's designed to meet specific abilities of the individual and the business needs of the employer. And it's carried out through flexible strategies such as, and if you'll look at, let me see where it is here. B, working with an employer to facilitate employment, including customizing a job description based on current employer needs or on previously unidentified and unmet employer needs. And that's where Kim's supervisor from Parisian's Women's Wear actually got that concept right. This is the law of the land. This is not regulation. This is the law. And it talks about job duties, work schedule, job arrangement, all of that from the perspective of the employee, not by the demands of the employer. And you can have representation to make it happen. This is the only part of rehab law that guarantees a job developer to help negotiate this with a potential employer. So, you know, it was a long struggle from 88 to 2014, but it happened. It happened. And customized employment is about unbundling tasks from jobs. Once those are unbundled, if an employer identifies it would be a benefit to their operation, you can rebundle it into a customized job description, and then that creates the flexibility that's such a hallmark of this concept. So about 5 years ago now, one of the federally funded centers that help voc rehab's state agencies, including Ohio State Agency, across the country, is called WINTAC, one of that's Work Incentive Technical Assistance Center. And they contracted with Mark Gold and Associates when I was president to work with people across the country to get a national consensus on exactly what is customized employment, and then it could be used for legislation, it could be used for delivery of services, etc. And we developed a set of so-called essential elements, and there are essential elements for customized employment, there are essential elements for discovery and for job development. And this took months and months to do, but it was successfully done. We turned it in to U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Education, where voc rehab is located, and they have accepted and begun to implement these essential elements. And so a job is customized if it starts with discovery rather than assessment. We do not recommend testing. We recommend finding out who people are. We try to avoid job titles as the target, although you can put a job title on yourself once you get your customized job. Job development's driven by the job seeker, not by what's open in the labor market. That's huge, folks. That's huge. All job descriptions are negotiated, not pre-existing. These occur in regular community workplaces, or if you want to own your own business, in a self-owned business. It's individualized, one person at a time, one job. This is not group employment. This isn't starting some kind of business that the agency starts and they pay people sub-minimum wage. If an employer is approached, the employer voluntarily accepts customized employment, as does the job seeker. No job seeker is required to accept a job that's been developed. So it's voluntary on both sides. Employers love it, so do job seekers. It's driven by a plan that identifies the job seeker's conditions for success, their interests, and their unique contributions. and it's based on tasks rather than these bundle job descriptions. This is big. Pay at least at the minimum wage, no more sub-minimum. And actually, customized employment becomes what's called a universal design strategy that all job seekers, any of us, can approach an employer with a customized proposal. There's a representative available, is in the federal definition that I showed you earlier, and we feel that positive disclosure of issues about disability are put on the table to negotiate as a rationale for why an employer would accept this. So it's like we're trying to bring disability out of the closet and say, let's talk about it, but talk about it positively. Let's don't deny it happens. Let's don't, now, you know, this is not about an employer trying to get out of something. This is about a job seeker saying, here's why my job needs to be customized, because I might not be able to competitively contribute, but I can contribute otherwise if you would like to negotiate. And employers are not the problem here. We are the problem. Our field is the problem. We've got to get our head around it. Rehab needs to, workforce needs to, schools need to. If we embrace this, it'll really pay off. And we determine that there's a process for customizing a job. And it always starts with discovery, always, at the very beginning, at the very basis. And then we get some positive paper on people through some sort of document. Mark Gold and Associates calls it a profile. Other people have different names for it. As long as that paper is positive, descriptive, useful, and non-evaluative, no tests. And then we go through a customized person-centered planning process that puts the job seeker in the driver's seat for driving job development. They don't have to go do it, but they direct what the job developer does. And then we develop with the individual some visual marketing strategies. We call them visual resumes or portfolios to let an employer see the very best that the job seeker has to offer. And then the job developer goes out with all of this information and then negotiates the customized job. At that point, once a job is successfully negotiated, customized dovetails with supported employment to become customized supported employment. And that's when you get job coaching and job site analysis and other things that people need for support. That's not a part of customized, that's a part of supported employment. So they fit together. Discovery is so important because it's the way around the testing that has held so many people back. Still today, rehab regularly looks at evaluation results and makes decisions about people. They should not be doing it, and it is just not necessary at all. So in order to get around that, discovery uses a qualitative process that avoids comparison. You just start with, of course she can work. Of course she can be in broadcasting. Of course she can, or he can do that. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is what we learn about the person in relation to what they have to offer. I love this saying. This is from a Hungarian scientist back in the 30s and 40s who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of vitamin C, of all things. And Dr. Georgi supposed that discovery consists of looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking something different. And that's a powerful, powerful thing to say about people who have not been supposed to be able to do things, but thinking that indeed they can. And if discovery starts with that, then you're going to get a really useful outcome. So how do discovery and customization fit together? Well, as you've seen, discovery is the very first act of customization. How can we know what to customize if we don't know who the person is? So we have to start with that question. And folks, you know, we can be way too glib about thinking we know what people want or what people can do, but even what people want. I mean, I know for me, I was just in total denial. I had no idea as a young person of what I wanted to do. I knew what my father did, and I thought that sounded okay, that he was a salesperson, and I thought, well, I'll just do it. Well, folks, I got a degree in sales and sales management, for goodness sakes, before it occurred to me, I hate this stuff, you know? So it's not an easy thing to answer. If we'll look indeed at what people do through the lens of discovery, we can really form a strong basis, a strong foundation for taking those next steps toward approaching employers. But it really takes starting with discovery. So discovery helps us assure that the intrinsic interest of the job seeker is followed. So an intrinsic interest is what you heard from Erin as she talked about the clarity of wanting to do broadcasting. Now, I'm not going to ask her, but if I did, I don't know Erin, if Erin would know any more than I would know how I got into the field that I'm in, or why I like boats so much. But you know it. Intrinsic is of you. It's of the person. It's something deep in your soul that you're just clear. This is what I want to do. And I think all people, even with the most significant impact of disability in their lives, have intrinsic interest if we are willing to help dig for them and find them and assist people to come to terms with them. So, it really is the appropriate starting point, because if you get it straight there, then everything else will follow. But then there's a concept we call conditions, or conditions for success, that in the real world, for each person, there are features that need to be in place in order to make employment successful. For some of us, I remember I used to whine because I had to drive 25 minutes to work. Well, there are people that drive an hour and 25 minutes to work. And then there are people that if they had to drive even 10 minutes, it would be too much. So, I mean, I just use that one thing of all the different conditions that we face. There's all kinds of things that make work more palatable and more possible. And then there are things that if these things are there, it's really going to be hard, and work won't feel nearly as satisfying or fun. So we seek to find what are those conditions for success. And then all people have unique contributions. Very few of us, and I know, have it all. I don't have any whole package for anybody anymore. But all people have these unique contributions. And if we can find those, and we're clever about identifying them, and we use the strategies of discovery, to do so, then these three components of intrinsic interest, conditions for success, and unique contributions give us what we need to move forward. And indeed, it creates a blueprint of sorts. And these features are the outcome of discovery. If we can find for people clarity about what are the individual's conditions for success, what are their intrinsic interests, and what are their potential contributions that are task-based, then we've got useful material we can take forward to employers. But then, what does the employer get out of it? Now, that's an interesting question that we're still struggling to get workforce people and Department of Labor folks to pay attention to. But we know the answer. We just need to get them to pay attention. So here's a way of thinking about the employer's benefit. And we start with the phrase that Kim's supervisor used many years ago now in 1988. That's 34 years ago. And that is unmet workplace needs. Every single workplace in the history of the world, NASA, the people that did the Webb telescope. I mean, it's hard to imagine anybody more capable than that. They have unmet needs, things that need to get done that aren't getting done. Every workplace in the world does. I totally believe it. And if we can get an employer to reflect on that, then you're opening the door to begin to make a match with those unique contributions. And then for some people, or for some employers, they have tasks that they have assigned to very highly paid people that would better be done by another worker at maybe an entry-level pay grade. We're not talking about, having people do things for less pay than they should get, but a lot of very highly paid people are assigned jobs that should be assigned to someone at more of an entry-level pay grade. And if that then frees up that very skilled person to do more of their job, then we can come in with the folks that we represent and take advantage of the fact that we have then saved somebody the time and do those tasks very much better. And then there are just areas of any workplace that needs additional focus that we need to say, we could look at this workplace and figure out what specific task could be done that would enhance the workplace. It's not an unmet need, but it's an improvement. These three components, if we can interact with an employer effectively, becomes the employer's reason for saying yes. And folks, I can tell you, because I've sat in front of employers and put this on the table, they get it. They get it. This isn't some, professional jargon or just some, sales pitch. This is simply benefit to an employer. And then you get a really neat algebraic equation of all things. That when you get those conditions for success, interest, and contributions, and then you find an employer who has one or more of these areas in which they would benefit, and you can bring them together, you've got an equation that balances and it works beautifully. Now, is this more difficult than just sending somebody out for an interview? Yeah, it is. But folks, we're talking about people who might have never worked or had given up on their dreams or any number, they're underemployed, they're miserable. But almost all the time they're simply unemployed, and people think they're unemployable. So by doing this, by using these strategies, you can really make something happen. Well, I hear all the time, well, isn't this customized stuff, isn't that just good supported employment? Oh, if it were only so, you know. If that's the case, there's pretty little bit of good supported employment around. But the fact is, they're totally different concepts. Competitive supported employment and customized employment operate with different areas of focus. It's not that one is good or bad, they're different. And I've created a grid to help you with it. But one of the things to think about is customized and supported focus on different aspects of employment. Customized employment focuses on the relationship, and the activities that I've talked about define the relationship between the employer and the employee, the customized employee. Supported employment in relation to customized starts in the support. It's after the relationship has been negotiated that a lot of people need supported employment to be successful. So here's the grid. And it's really quite simple if you think about it, or a matrix, if you will. The two columns are competitive employment and customized. The two rows are employment that only uses the natural supports of the workplace and no other. And then the lower row is employment that offers supported employment. So let's look at the top left. This is not a place that most of us on this call is going to find ourselves. And that is, a person has a disability and if they get assistance maybe with how to interview and how to dress and how to speak to an employer, and they get a job, they can likely hold the job with just the supports that are offered and maybe some reasonable accommodation. But they don't need job coaching. They don't need ongoing supported employment. Folks, some states have actually looked at their outcomes. I'm not going to talk about the state, but a state very, very close, a Great Lakes state close to Ohio. 88% of all voc rehab closures are in the top left quadrant. 88%. It's almost 9 out of 10. That doesn't leave a lot of room for these other categories, okay? Because this is that you don't have to do much to get a success with these. But let's look at the others. Let's go down the column. The Rehab Act 1986 defines competitive supported employment as job seekers meeting a competitive standard but needing job coaching support to maintain the job. So that's competitive supported employment. And most states started in the late 80s offering competitive supported employment. And now it's a factor in most states, it's still not very big. What we're talking about is the bottom right quadrant. And that is an individual who both needs customized employment, but also needs supported employment services on the job. These people are the least likely to be successful. Most of them are currently unemployed and considered to be unemployable. But folks, I guarantee you they can work. All we have to do is just decide how much are we willing to move in this direction. And it's turned out it doesn't cost a whole lot more because you're so much more effective in the long run. That top right quadrant is particularly interesting to the U.S. Department of Labor. They continue to focus on those job seekers that if we customize a job, they might not need ongoing support. And it turns out a lot of people who have jobs in either of the competitive scenarios might be much happier in that top right quadrant. I don't find myself working there much because most of the folks just happen to need more support. And so it's that bottom quadrant. So I hope that that kind of differentiates supported employment from customized for you and shows you where they actually dovetail and they come together. So I'm going to wrap up with a set of stories that just talks about interests and jobs. And I planned for about an hour, and I'll be just about exactly an hour here. And I hope we'll be thinking about some questions. I know Erin's still on the call, so you may still have some questions for her. I bet she'd be glad to answer, and I certainly will. But I want to take you through just some examples, this potpourri of people over my experience. And I love James. James loved organizing everything at his house. I mean, to the extent that his mother and father would just, they'd get so frustrated. Everything at school, just you name it, James would organize it. But when we looked at his interest, he was as outrageous as Erin wanting to be a broadcaster. James wanted to be a police officer. And we didn't quite get there, but what you see him organizing here are misdemeanor arrest reports at the local sheriff's department. And this was an unmet need within the sheriff's department to have arrest reports filed in such a way that they were much easier to get into the system for data collection. And James has been working there for a number of years, very, very successful. Here was two brothers, neither of which there's a syndrome that kind of happened in this family where the brothers have both significant physical and some mild intellectual disability. And they just turned down any help because they demanded to work together. And no one would listen. Everybody said, we can't do that. No, we don't do that at rehab here. I'm sorry, you can't do it. So when we had the chance to do discovery with them and then customized job development, we found an employer in a audio-visual company that needed extensive things that were paper-based converted to digitized. And while the employer wasn't willing to pay the brothers at the same time, except for a half hour, and this is that half hour, one brother works in the morning, the brother, by the way, that gets up every morning at the crack of dawn, and the brother that is by his own definition sleeps in until about 11, comes in after noon. So those just working together to make this work is just, it can just happen. It's a young woman that wants to be very close, Erin, to you. She wants to be in broadcasting, and she wants to be the first disc jockey on the Gulf Coast who gets to speak Vietnamese on a radio station. And her niche is that as storms are coming, we missed Ian, thank goodness. I hate for those people in Florida that got hit, but we didn't need another hurricane on the Mississippi coast. But just making sure she could speak to the shrimpers, most of whom now are Vietnamese speakers. And but to get to that point, she's got to put the work in, which she does tasks that are developed from reception, disc jockeys, advertising, and station manager. I can tell you, Trang literally saved the advertising specialist job because the ad specialist could sell anybody an ad for radio, but couldn't do paperwork at all. Just refused, wouldn't do it. And so she was about to get fired because she could never turn her paperwork in. And so Trang does her paperwork, an unmet need that then benefits both. Tony wants to be a musician. So we found him a job in a music store, and he treats musical instruments like items on the altar at church. I mean, he is just so respectful of every musical instrument. And he's learned band instrument cleaning in the state of Texas, where elementary schools, I think, have marching bands. And so he has got a job for life. Carolyn started babysitting with her significant cerebral palsy and her intellectual disability when she was 12. She babysat her sister's infant. And now she wanted to work in the childcare field, and customized employment allowed her to get around some of the requirements that Michigan had for childcare workers. And also, the last thing she wanted to do was be seeing the wrong end of these toddlers, and you know which end I'm talking about, every day at diaper changing time. So one of the skills she has is a behavioral intervention specialist now, based on her ability to see kids starting and escalating behavior, especially the little tyke you see her working with here is famously identified as a biter. So as he starts escalating his behavior, Carolyn comes in and redirects him, and the biting incidents went from about 5 per month to 0 on Carolyn's watch. That's real contribution. Eric just, he wasn't quite sure what he wanted to do, but at home, everything that operated in a motor was something he was interested in. And so during discovery, we started looking and actually found a motorsports company who, while he doesn't do the repairs on the four-wheelers like this one, he is part of the system that makes sure that he's the interplay between the parts department and the mechanics. And then occasionally he's convinced some of the people that he can rebuild a carburetor, so he's been allowed to do work like that. So you really get these very specific areas of benefit where the employer says, gosh, it would really help. We always have our highly paid mechanics standing around the parts area. The last thing we need is for that to happen. So if Eric can do that, that's going to work for us. This gentleman, I mean, we were just almost stymied in discovery until his mother told a story about how Ernesto helped deliver groceries. And both mom had to walk, and he would go with her in his power chair. He's not able to move any part of his body except his head. He doesn't generate any speech sound whatsoever. And his mother told the story of going to the grocery store and deciding that she had bought too many groceries, and she started hanging plastic bags of groceries all over Ernesto's wheelchair. And when that happened, the job developer just had this, or the discovery facilitator had this flash of, if he can carry groceries through gang territory, I mean, they lived in South Central, it's mean streets there, then he could use his wheelchair as a mobility device and all you have to do now is find somebody who needs things delivered, and works at Transamerica Corporation, field office. Greg was one of the most interesting people. His mother got so mad at the organization in New Jersey because you want to take my son and you want to put him in front of a computer. My son loves to sweep, she said. And Greg's there nodding his head. Yes, what she's saying. I can't say it to you, but she's saying it. So listen to my mother. She knows. And so the negotiation with Greg was, if we can find you a job sweeping and you get paid regular wages for it, then would you do it? And his mother looked at him and he looked at his mother, and they nodded and said, if that's the case, go ahead. And so now we're limited to, and then she said, oh, and it's got to be sawdust. It can't be anything else. We don't want him sweeping up dirt and dust or stuff, coal dust. So you have to find who's woodworking and who has a need. Well, a cabinetry shop in his town was having a terrible time with slip and falls. They had a milling process that created laminate chips about the size of nickels, I guess, that would fall on the floor. And those laminate chips were like pieces of ice. And the workers, the operators, were always falling because they weren't sweeping under their feet. Well, why didn't they sweep under their feet? Because it affected their productivity and they didn't want to stop. So workman's comp was killing the factory, just killing them. And so we approached the employer and he said, "Would you mean he'll spot sweep just to make sure?" He said, I'm thinking right now I'm about to sue the dust control system. He said, I spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on dust control. It does a great job picking up sawdust and leaves all the laminate chips on the floor. And I'm trying to decide, do I go to court and sue them? But you've just given me an alternative. So we hired Greg instead. And in doing that, he saved so much money during the first 6 months that the savings in workman's comp premium was more than his salary. So, I mean, that's a real benefit to an employer. I happened to do Discovery with Evan and had a chance to go into his bedroom, and no part of his wall was without posters for sports teams, particularly University of Utah Utes, but also, and I had to love him because I'm from the Gulf Coast and I'm a Saints fan. Sorry, you Saints, your Bengals came down and broke the Saints' hearts last week, and the Browns aren't doing too bad this year for the Browns. So, but the Bengals, that was something else. Close game. So anyway, I also on his wall is a Saints poster. So I love the guy immediately. We start talking about the Saints, and so what he does now is he puts together the travel suitcases of equipment for 13 sports teams of the University of Utah. And so it's just and he'd never worked with a computer before. So they taught him, this is a coworker. It's not a job coach, teaching him how to do that. Great job. I mean, he floats to where he has field privileges, both in the basketball court and the football field, while his parents are in the nosebleed section in each place. Carolyn, starting a coffee cart because she doesn't even drink coffee, for goodness sakes. She just loves hospitality and loves it when people tell her that, Catherine, your coffee is great. Or I've got Carolyn here, but it's Catherine. And so that's, I mean, it's just really following who people are. And one of the most interesting we had was this gentleman in Texas who came to a new service, and he announced although it was hard for him to say it, he announced he wanted to be a club DJ in Dallas. Folks, that's, and the guy has so much disability. He's got an intellectual disability. He's got mild cerebral palsy. He is legally blind and uses a white cane for mobility assistance. And on top of all of that, he has about the most egregious first sound stutter block a human being can have. He starts trying to get a word out and it just doesn't come out. And it's like, you want to be a DJ? They're going to kill you. And he finally gets it out. When music is playing and I have a microphone, I don't stutter. It took him maybe 5 minutes to say that. And so in Discovery, we decided, nobody's going to help him with equipment. So we set it up and talked the funder into going to a rent-a-center, to all this stuff right out of a rent-a-center. He owns his own equipment now, but to find out if it happened, how it was going to happen, microphone, soundboard. He had to have a device so he could see what's on the CDs, just all of that. And he picks up the microphone and it's Isaac Hayes. I mean, it is just mellow and perfect and soulful. And it's like, he's right. He has a personal assistant he uses as his roadie. He's not able to carry any of this stuff or set it up. But he does about 4 gigs a month and will pay anybody a finder's fee if they find him a gig. So he's done anniversaries, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, you name it, he's done it. And it just is a great situation. But now that's not enough to sustain him. So he wouldn't even talk about working until he needed money to buy music. And so now he has a 20-hour customized job where he actually has enough money that he can pay for his music, because the passion, like most people who are in the performing business, and you don't break through, they're pretty poor. And so his job makes sure that happens for him. So I'm right here at the end. I'd like you to know there are some resources on everything I've talked about. And since I'm retired, I don't mind making a pitch here for this. Now, we do charge for these, but there's a complete series of discovery manuals that can be purchased from Mark Gold and Associates. There's a complete series of job development manuals and a brand new 250 plus page manual on systematic instruction. We were going to make a series on that, but decided to put it all in one book. So they're available at markgold.com, and make sure you put MARCGOLD. And also on the website at markgold.com, there's all kinds of free, everything on discovery virtually is free. We sell the manuals, but give everything else away. And we've done that for almost 40 years. And just want to make sure that, so if you need discovery forms or job development forms or articles, there's all kinds of information available. So Deb, I'm going to wrap it up there. And I've left nearly, plus 15 minutes in case there are questions either for me or for Erin. So I'd like to open the floor and just see what people have to ask.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask first before, because we really need this for our grant, if people would just do our last poll and then we'll start the Q&A. Is that okay?
So you're going to put a poll up?
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, it's ready. one thing while we're waiting, Mark, I remember hearing of a discovery scenario where the job coach took a young man through an auto parts store. And they were going through the manager, they just showed up and said, hey, can you give us a tour of your place? And so the manager gladly showed them the different locations of things, but they noticed that this young man was fascinated by this box, like a catch-all box. So, people didn't buy screws, so they put it there. Then all this stuff needs to be put away, and he knew exactly what they were. And so the manager said, I need this to be put away. We need to do this to restock, and no one wants to do it. And he ended up hiring him right there to do it. And it's interesting because the job coach did not know that his father had owned an auto parts store years ago. So this is a really cool example.
Absolutely. Okay. That's why discovery involves actually looking at families, and we don't want to be prying, but we want to know some things like that, because if you get that information, it can be useful.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead. We'll wait another minute. I know the last time when you were talking to us, you mentioned these presentation kind of things.
Portfolios, yes.
Portfolios, and how people can show pictures of their capabilities, their experience.
Yeah, and in fact, we now call it a visual resume, and the let's see, the green. It's the red manual in the Discovery series is the visual resume manual. So we have a manual just on that.
Yeah, I just think that's something to just mention as we look at the results. So I thank you all for sharing these, and now let's go ahead and open up for Q&A.
Any question? Be sure and unmute if you're going to ask a question, and whether it's for me or for Erin.
You want to unshare your screen?
I can do that.
Katie Rathers was asking, where can I find a discovery coach?
Well, one thing I would do is ask if they've had any training, and I don't know what training is available currently now in Ohio, or even in the particular area of Ohio in which you live. But the fact that there are materials now that even if someone has not done discovery, there's information online, and there's that information from MG&A that someone could read the manuals and follow the process. It lays it all out. So in a worst case situation, when someone has not received training, there's still resources that those manuals are $15 a piece. So for $60, they could have the information they need to pursue discovery, and that's what I would recommend. But find out in your area through local employment providers if discovery is something that they might have already been trained on. Any other questions on the chat box?
I'm looking. Katie had a question for Erin, wondering if she had other friends. Has she made new friends in your career?
I made a lot of different friends. My mouth is getting dry.
Yeah, that's what happens in media, right?
Yeah.
Have you met anyone else that shares that same passion of yours?
Besides both my sisters. And I think my mom is also Another one who inspires me, my mom, my sister Beth, and my mom always been my biggest supporters ever. And they challenge me no matter what.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Um, how do you find a person, place that does a quality discovery process? In our county, I'm hearing that it is rarely done, so that the people have been trained, have done very, probably very little. I've asked about it and no one ever sounds really confident in it. Are certain places, boards of DD, required to offer discovery? I would like, I would prefer to find someone that is either familiar with my child or at least has experience in the facilitating the discovery process.
Well,
Where I work at a Kiva, I also used to work for early intervention in the preschool area. So I got to work with kids as well.
Okay.
and I would add to that, Deb, you may know if I guess they're still called 169 boards or the local boards. If maybe that law is now well passed,
Yeah, yeah.
but county boards though will vary significantly, and it can be most challenging when uh, you know an organization um, has not really embraced and developed skills in this area. Now, MGNA, Mark Golden Associates, is a training organization. We would be glad to come in, or if not come in, there's still some COVID issues, but we do discovery training both in face to face and we do it online. So there are some options that people could use. And I really sometimes though, when you're in a situation and you hear about something and you want it, I would just recommend um, getting the best information you can. Like read the manuals that I reference, read some articles that are out there, and I've seen family members, for instance. I think it's hard for a family member to do discovery within their own family because it's hard to disconnect. You don't want to be too hands off, but at the same time you don't want to be so caught up in every all day to day stuff that you miss some stuff. So I've seen family members actually agree, if you'll do discovery with my son or daughter, I'll do discovery with yours, and then you can share and actually share the experience together, and not even go the funding route. So in a worst case scenario, I would, without any services, I might even try that. But there are plenty of resources now that are available to you, so it'll take you through the process. Without it, you'd just be, what do I do? Well, you need to, you know $60 isn't a whole lot to invest, and that could be just what you need to kind of kick things off. So I would recommend at least trying that.
So are you talking about the pamphlet, the books that you showed us? Those are where they should
Yeah, they're
draw from?
available at Mark Golden Associates, markgold.com. It's something the company is doing now. I'm the lead author on all of them, but I'm not directly involved anymore because of my retirement. But still, the people that are doing it know it hands down. They're great. So
Yeah, one thing, if you guys go look at that Mark Gold and Associates, the webpage, you'll see a lot of articles that Mike has written, and it's all there for you to look at. Plus, if you plug in his name, you'll see him a lot on YouTube. So if you want to revisit this, we are recording this, and I will edit it. Thank goodness we can edit it with all my little YouTube thing that just went poorly. But there is another question from Kimberly. How do you deal with employers that really do not want to talk to you?
Well, one of the things that we've done, that's a great question, and I can really answer that. There will be employers who don't want to talk to you, okay? And so one thing that we do in our planning, in our customized planning process, that's the customized plan manual 3 for discovery. We identify between 15 to 25 employers. We have found that to be the magic number, 15 to 25. And we also work with people in discovery to help us have alternate intrinsic interest, so that way, when an employer says no, they are not obligated in any way to say yes or to even listen. And when you find that, say thank you very much, and then you go to another employer and another employer. And we have found that with a minimum of 15 employers, if all of those employers are called on, you've got about a 90% chance of getting a job from that list. It may not be your number one. I mean, that's just not the way the world works. But you've got a very good chance if you'll identify that critical mass of employers and have somebody actually make the calls. But all the pieces have to come together. I mean, this is not, it's not just easy stuff, but it's all doable stuff. If it was easy, everybody would be employed, but we're still trailblazing here. We're still finding things out, but it is possible.
I'm thinking about what we do as an independent living center. We kind of do that discovery thing because we want to find out what people's goals are and help them towards those plans. So my mind is going like this too, thinking, maybe I need to be more educated in this process.
Well, those manuals will really help you.
Yeah. So while you guys are still thinking of questions, I just want to share something with you. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully find the right place to go. Um, it's just our contact information. I do want to let you all know that, did I miss any questions? Anybody asking any more questions?
I actually have one more question when you're done, Deb.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. Mike, thank you so much for your presentation.
Sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I work in schools, in a school setting, and often, when we're doing our transition planning goals,
Yep.
that's an area where, most of us could use, some more training and, really strengthen that part of the IEP. Often we are asked to provide some data to show like why we would set a goal. And I'm hearing you say like 15 to 25 uh, employer opportunities is kind of like a magic number where you should be able to find something. Is that what I heard? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And that's based on about 30 years of putting that together. Yes.
Okay. Is there would you be able to provide a link where I could cite that with my administrators and my teams just to substantiate, like if I were to suggest, hey, as a goal, we might want to help a student identify, over the next year, a couple of years, that this is an ideal number where should result in good outcomes for them to
Right.
find something.
I would, and here's the reality. I understand the question, but also understand our reality.
Right.
Mark Gold and Associates was not, when Mark Gold was alive back in the 70s and early 80s, he was a consummate researcher. But those of us he influenced, we were practitioners.
Right.
And over the years, we we found all this information, but we weren't researchers. So
Right.
most of that information did not get in a study.
Okay.
But you will
Okay.
find that, however, in the job development manual, one of those 3 manuals, and you could cite one of those manuals, and it's in there of that
Okay.
critical mass.
Okay.
And so, and most people would say that, if it's a published manual, although I don't claim it is based on a research study, that would be a real tough one to do. It's
I don't
available
think
to you.
anybody would even check. They would just want to
Yeah,
know that, like,
that's where.
I
So
got some information
that
from
would be manual. It's either going to be manual 2 or it's not the. I think manual 2, but anyway, you could. I'll think about that a little bit and maybe try to get to Deb on it. But that's
Sure.
what I would do. Just
Okay.
cite one of those MG&A job development manuals. I can tell you it's in there.
Right. Because I do know they say 3 to 5 job experiences during high school years results in, I forget what the percentage, like way higher post-secondary.
Yeah, that's some
employment.
of a colleague of mine, Rich Luking's research actually. But Rich was a researcher, and he
Right.
did come up with that. And
Right.
I think he's right. I mean, that's good stuff.
And I
So
think
it's
that's
that.
awesome. I just need to
Yeah.
bring that to my teams as like, okay, so how do we get those 3 to 5 opportunities?
There you
Like,
go.
how many options do we need to, like, kind of vet out? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep, I got
Okay,
you.
cool. Awesome.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, so Katie, the lady was just talking, she had presented our first employment series. We started with the importance of play and leisure time and life skills. And then the second part was getting ready for your IEP before the age of 14. So I am in the process of editing those, and I will send you guys all the links once they're done. So any other questions before I say goodbye to our awesome presenters? Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Erin, thank you for sharing your passion, and I look forward to see what kind of mischief we can get into. And Michael, I really appreciate you coming out of retirement to help us with this, because it's such an important subject, especially for people that are considered very hard to serve.
Absolutely.
So it's just changing the whole paradigm. So anyway, thank you so much. Good night, everybody. You take care. Thank you for your patience.